What is the worst thing you've ever seen someone do at a funeral? A few years back, when the uncle of my mother died, my young cousin, 8 years/old, cried a lot at the funeral. It took some time, but eventually he calmed down and his parents went for a little walk with him for some distraction. But then he noticed that his first name was written on one of the tombstones. He mentions it loudly and one of the bystanders said, "Yeah, it's already reserved for you." He immediately started crying again. Her ex told us about all the great things she did in bed and what a loss for mankind that is. In present of her boyfriend. My mother-in-law took a photo of a wine glass during the lunch we had after, and she posted it on Facebook. Guess what her caption was? "Life is grand." It was my mother's funeral. The gentleman had a large family, and all of his siblings got up and made it all about themselves, dredged up old family drama, made it clear that they resented his wife, etc. It was so painfully awkward. I went to the funeral of a co-worker's fiancé. The girl's ex showed up, and as people were lined up to say goodbye, we all witnessed him lean into the coffin and kiss her on the lips. I will repeat myself, the ex-boyfriend of the deceased woman kissed her dead body at her funeral. In front of her fiancé. Her brothers quite literally threw him out. My uncle was pissed about something in my grandmother's will. So during the funeral, he went out to the parking lot and keyed everyone's car. It should be noted, he has severe brain injury from a motorcycle accident that causes him to be constantly angry and paranoid. Still, he handed out his business cards at his stepdaughter's funeral. There was very nearly a fistfight. Dwight, good morning. I'm Dwight Schrute. Thank you all for your prayers and your remembrances. Like Justin and his disfigurement, I too have had a horrible year. They say that the middle class is disappearing, and with it, the soul of America. So, as a gift to this beautiful congregation, I would like to offer a 4% discount on all Dunder Mifflin Sabre products if you buy a printer at full price. My grandma told my dad at his own father's funeral that her pain was much greater because she had lost her husband, while he had only lost his dad. As if grief is a competition. She is a shitty person anyway, and not even blood related to us, so we just kinda don't associate anymore. Edit, she called my dad last night, claiming that she and my granddad had a baby in 1999 and the baby died when it was 5. But she's full of shit, just making up lies in hopes we'll associate with her again. My husband went to his great-aunt's funeral, and while they did the little ceremony in the cemetery, great-aunt's granddaughters were all hiding behind a tombstone giggling and doing coke. Edit, her grandkids were like 17 to 23. My mom passed 2 days before my first child was born. I didn't get pregnant again till 11 years later, so I was 5 months pregnant with my second child when my father passed. Someone came up to me at the funeral and said to me, "You should stop having kids, it's bad luck for your family." Nowhere near as bad as most comments, but the family didn't allow for his twin to speak. Straight up skipped over the allocated time for the living twin to get up and speak about his brother, who was his last remaining immediate family. I don't think I can ever forgive the late wife for putting him through that. She treated him so horribly all throughout the sickness, and then to not allow him to be a part of the funeral was the final nail in the coffin. Why did they mistreat him so badly? We don't really know why, because she, the late wife, was awful from the start of the cancer diagnosis. We, my family, think it's a weird resentment that the healthy twin who ran marathons and didn't eat red meat got very sick, and the less healthy twin didn't. It was just bad genetic luck despite them being identical. On top of which, she has always been a control freak, so it got really bad when he got sick. Controlled who could see him and when, controlled his phone, etc. Honestly, my father, the twin, found out about the passing of his brother in line at a Starbucks. He was buying coffee for his brother and a friend walked in and told him then and there. an hour after his brother had passed. My aunt crawled into her father's open casket. I knew a guy who climbed up into the casket with his grandfather. This one's sweet and wholesome. He was around 4 years old. He wasn't sure what was going on, and people weren't giving him much attention. He asked someone what his grandfather was doing in a box at the front of the room. A relative, thinking they were explaining death in an age-appropriate way, told him that Grandpa went to sleep and won't wake up again. So we went up to the casket and climbed up. The room froze in shock. Then he said, "Good night, Grandpa," and he kissed him. Adults told him later you could hear a pin drop and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. My sister murdered her father, my stepfather. At the time we didn't know she was guilty. PTW, just so you know, she did this purely for financial gain. During the viewing she drug her little boy to the casket, and because he didn't cry enough to suit her she pinched him on the upper arm until he was sobbing, then took him around to everyone saying he was really crying because he loved his gramps so much. Damn. It is wild that psychopathic people walk around among us. He told the family he was marrying his longtime girlfriend. My mom had passed away 10 years previously, on Sunday, and by the next Friday, he was dead and she was executor of his estate shortly thereafter. She had been Daddy's little girl her whole life, but once she realized the will would be changed, the clock was ticking. It took her 5 days to conceive of the plan and to carry it out. Not a funeral, but when my granddad passed and we went to view his body at the crematorium, my aunt started stealing from the facility the second the employee's back was turned. Just shoving anything that wasn't nailed down into her purse and pockets. Unbelievable. And yes, we called her out and made her put it all back. Do you mind me asking what effect the public spaces of a crematorium have worth stealing? In my opinion, nothing. According to my aunt, the pens, the miniature display urns, a candy dish with the candy, and some other random bits and pieces. I have no idea what her thought process was, if there even was one. My grandpa died. His son, my uncle, went around asking for money to give to his now widowed mother. He collected around $500 worth of donations from family, friends, etc. He pocketed it, and my grandma didn't receive shit. My brother-in-law is a mortician. Boy, does he have stories. One of the best, a guy disguised himself as a nun, shows up at the funeral, pulls a gun from under his habit, and tries to shoot the deceased's son. Luckily the gun malfunctioned and didn't fire. The son then decks the nun and knocks him out, kicks him in the head a few times, and is pulled off by other family. Police are called, yada yada yada. Turns out the deceased owed the nun quite a lot of money and the son had refused to honor the debt. At my father's funeral, one of my aunts asked my mom when would she get out of the house. It's always awful to hear about greed ruining the family over the deceased person's will. It really shows people's true colors and proves that they were just waiting for the person to die rather than trying to enjoy their remaining time with them. Always breaks my heart. Die. It's like proposing at someone else's wedding, just rude. Imagine somebody proposing at someone's funeral. My ex-boyfriend asked me out at his own father's funeral. If that counts. Now we know why he is the ex. Not a proposal, but immediately after finishing my great-grandfather's funeral, we all went to my grandfather's wedding. A colleague of my mum's lost her husband to a heart problem, and on the way to the funeral, her colleague had a heart attack in the car and died soon after. It was in the news because of how heartbreaking it was. I couldn't imagine being their family. I saw someone die at a wedding once. Me too. They passed out and the ambulance came for him, and the wedding continued. Sometime later, the person we were sitting with, my dad's cousin whose family owns a funeral home, got a call from the hospital to pick up the body. My uncle was cremated. He lived across from a lake, and it was decided that we wanted his ashes spread on this little island on this lake. I was tasked with swimming with the urn from the boat to the island, holding it out of the water. I then stood at the edge of a small cliff with my nephews beside me and all the family watching in the boat. I opened the urn to dump his ashes over the cliff. We all say a few things, and as I go to dump the ashes, the wind picks up and blows the ashes all over my wet body. One of the worst things that ever happened to me. Oh, I had this happen as a river guide. Family brought Grandma's ashes to release into pristine wilderness on a glacial river on a mellow float trip. Dad slips and drops them all over the raft instead. Everyone starts crying hysterically that he had fucked up. I interrupted, telling them, "Hold up, no crying yet." Now the stretch of river we were on was flat for miles, scenic and gorgeous. No rough spots, except. Suddenly, I dropped the raft into the only massive hole, splashy wave, for miles, washing Grandma off the raft and soaking the family. The water was bloody cold and they all started at me in horror before laughing hysterically. Apparently Grandma was a bit of a jokester and would have appreciated that exit instead. What is the worst thing you've ever seen someone do at a funeral? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you wanna see more videos like this one.